The stars had always been humanity's limit, but no one could have predicted that limit would soon become the battlefield of an intergalactic war on Earth. There had been whispers of other worlds and civilizations just beyond the reach of their telescopes, but nothing prepared them for the day the sky was blotted out by the first wave of alien ships descending from the heavens, massive structures that tore through the atmosphere with a sound like thunder as the clouds split open above them. The people below watched in awe and fear as the ships landed without a sound, each of the vast ships dwarfing the tallest skyscrapers. The sight was awe-inspiring yet terrifying. The air was thick with tension and uncertainty as humanity realized it wasn't just their world anymore. The Xiphorians came with little warning, their fleet emerging from the depths of space. Without so much as a communication, they landed in the middle of the major cities around the globe. Towering and monstrous, the Xiphorians were a race of beings that had conquered countless civilizations across the stars. They had no need for diplomacy, no interest in understanding the species they encountered. Their goal was always the same: domination. The Xiphorians believed they had seen everything, and that no one could stand in their way. They had lived for centuries, and their empire stretched across star systems beyond the comprehension of any human mind. Their ships glided silently into place above Earth, their soldiers disembarking in armored suits as they surveyed the planet with cold, calculating eyes. At first, the humans thought it was some kind of elaborate hoax or a test of some sort, a strange performance staged by their governments. But the panic grew when the alien ships didn't leave. When the Xiphorians began to move toward the city centers, humanity realized this was no game. They had been discovered by a force far beyond their own. It was a realization that hit like a gut punch. Humanity had always believed themselves the pinnacle of life in the galaxy, but now, standing face to face with a race that had wiped out entire worlds, the truth became undeniable. They were far from the top of the food chain. The Xiphorians were not here to learn or study, they were here to take. The alien invaders made their first demand clear as they broadcast their message across all channels: humanity must surrender the planet or face destruction. They were offered nothing but submission, no dialogue, no room for negotiation. It was clear from the outset the Xiphorians had no interest in understanding Earth or its people. They were here for one reason, and one reason alone: Earth's resources and its strategic location in the galaxy. There was no room for disagreement, no voice to challenge the might of their advanced technology or their overwhelming military power. Yet even as humanity trembled beneath the weight of this demand, something stirred within the human spirit: the instinct to fight back, no matter how hopeless the odds seemed. The Xiphorians had underestimated one thing: their assumption that humanity would bend to their will. They had failed to consider the most unpredictable and dangerous aspect of the human race: their ability to adapt, to create, to think beyond the obvious. They thought they were facing an easy conquest, but in truth they were walking into a battle unlike any they had ever encountered. For the human mind was a force capable of bringing down even the mightiest of empires, and the Xiphorians would soon learn the most deadly weapon humanity possessed wasn't one of destruction, but of invention. The humans were caught in a storm of fear and uncertainty as the Xiphorians made their presence known across the globe, their ships hovering ominously above cities and landscapes. For the first time in history, nations put aside their differences and turned to face a common enemy. World leaders scrambled to respond, but the overwhelming scale of the invasion left them paralyzed. No one knew how to combat such an advanced foe, and panic spread faster than news. The Xiphorians, however, seemed entirely unconcerned. They sent a simple message, a demand for humanity's immediate surrender, broadcast across every communication channel available. The message was cold and impersonal, offering no room for negotiation, no understanding, simply an ultimatum. Humanity's existence was now a choice: submit or perish. For days the world stood still, each nation grappling with the weight of the decision. But among the confusion and fear, there were voices of defiance, small at first, but growing louder. Some governments urged diplomacy, others spoke of resistance, and yet there were those who felt that humanity's only hope lay in survival by any means necessary. Regardless of the differing views, one truth emerged from the chaos: Humanity could not, would not, simply roll over and surrender. The first meeting was arranged in neutral territory, a secluded part of Earth's surface, a vast stretch of land surrounded by nothing but a barren desert. The alien fleet descended, its ships covering the sky, their size making Earth's tallest structures look like ants. They had come to negotiate, or so the humans hoped. It wasn't much of a meeting, really. The humans sent their leaders, their best diplomats, and their brightest minds. They came to the table not just to speak, but to understand, to make sense of the beings that had appeared in their skies. The Xiphorians, for their part, arrived in full armor, their faces hidden behind dark, reflective visors, their words cold and sharp. The conversation was brief. The Xiphorians made it clear that they were not here to negotiate in the way humans understood the term. They didn't care about Earth's people, its culture, or its resources. The message was simple: bow to them, or face the consequences. Humanity's future rested in the hands of those who could appease or resist. But what the Xiphorians did not realize, what they couldn't possibly have known, was that this meeting marked the beginning of their downfall. The humans, in their desperation, weren't just asking for mercy. They were learning. Every word exchange, every gesture from the Xiphorians was being analyzed, dissected, and understood. In the face of this unprecedented invasion, humanity's greatest weapon began to take shape: their ability to adapt, to think, and to innovate. As the Xiphorians spoke with their cold, calculated voices, the humans quietly observed them, cataloging their behavior, their technology, and their mannerisms. Every piece of information, no matter how small, was valuable. The Xiphorians might have dismissed the humans as weak, insignificant, but they had underestimated the human thirst for knowledge. They had underestimated the one thing the Xiphorians could never have prepared for: humanity's boundless creativity. The Xiphorians thought they were in control, but in their arrogance, they overlooked something essential. They hadn't considered that the greatest strength of humanity wasn't in its weapons or its military might. It was in the minds of its people, in their relentless drive to create and to learn. They had shown up expecting a quick victory, but what they had truly encountered was a species that didn't just survive. It thrived in the face of adversity. And though the Xiphorians would not know it yet, the seeds of their defeat were already being planted. The human mind was already beginning to build the foundation for a weapon unlike anything the universe had ever seen. After the first tense encounter, humanity was left reeling, trying to process the enormity of the Xiphorian threat. They had barely survived their first contact with an empire that spanned entire star systems, and the weight of that realization was heavy on every heart. Yet amidst the fear and confusion, something extraordinary began to stir within the human race. The meeting had been brief, but it had provided the world with something crucial: an opportunity to study the invaders, and more importantly, an opportunity to learn. While the Xiphorians had been focused on asserting dominance, they had overlooked something simple yet profoundly powerful: humanity's capacity for innovation. It wasn't long before a small team of scientists and engineers, scattered across the globe, began to piece together the fragments of information they had gathered from the Xiphorian invasion. There was one detail in particular that intrigued them: the strange energy signature emanating from the Xiphorian ships and technology. It was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. The energy was stable, yet seemed to bend the very fabric of reality in subtle ways. It was, in essence, a new form of energy, a breakthrough that could hold the key to defeating the invaders. A group of researchers, initially skeptical, began working in secret to reverse engineer the alien technology. They were not the largest or most powerful teams, but they were driven by something the Xiphorians could not understand: sheer human determination. As they dug deeper into the remnants of Xiphorian equipment, they discovered a bizarre pattern, a kind of blueprint embedded within the energy itself, a kind of forgotten language that humanity could manipulate. It was a cryptic but intriguing code, a puzzle that, once cracked, could unlock unimaginable potential. One by one, Humans began to make breakthroughs, seemingly by accident at first. A simple modification to an old machine, a new configuration of a broken piece of alien tech, began to produce unexpected results. The first success was modest, a device that could harness and store the alien energy. It wasn't much, but it was a start. But the real breakthrough came when they realized something even more profound. The device wasn't just a power source. It was a catalyst, a tool that could evolve on its own. The implications were staggering. As soon as the device was activated, it started to adapt, learning from its environment and input. Each time the humans attempted to tweak it, the machine found a way to improve itself, adjusting in ways no one could predict. It was as though the device had its own form of artificial intelligence, one capable of rethinking its own design. The researchers were stunned. This wasn't just a weapon. It was the foundation of something much more dangerous. They had discovered a tool that could evolve as fast as human thought itself. Meanwhile, the Xiphorians remained blissfully unaware of the danger growing on Earth. They had underestimated the humans, dismissing them as a primitive species with no true technological advantage. The Xiphorians continued their conquest, laying waste to the few human strongholds that resisted their control, confident that nothing could stop them. But what they didn't know was that humanity was no longer just reacting to their invasion. They were preparing to fight back in a way the Xiphorians couldn't have predicted, through their minds, their creativity, and the very technologies the invaders had foolishly overlooked. The device that had begun to evolve so rapidly was only the beginning. Soon, humans were not just reverse engineering Xiphorian technology. They were improving it. They were adapting it to their own needs, shaping it into something new. Each scientist, engineer, and inventor added their own unique perspective, transforming the device into a weapon of unfathomable potential. Humanity was no longer on the defensive. They were preparing to launch an offensive unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. The Xiphorians had thought they were dealing with a weak and primitive species, but they had failed to account for the one thing they could never understand: the unstoppable force of human imagination. The invasion had begun to drag on, with Earth's forces fighting tooth and nail against an enemy whose sheer strength seemed unbeatable. The Xiphorians, with their advanced weapons and unrelenting tactics, had initially assumed that humanity would submit or crumble under pressure. But what the Xiphorians hadn't anticipated was how quickly the humans adapted to every challenge they faced. It wasn't just about brute force. It was about outsmarting them at every turn, finding ways to innovate and evolve that would render their superior technology useless. Humanity had discovered the key to winning the war, and it wasn't a single weapon. It wasn't a mighty fleet or an all-powerful energy source. It was the humans themselves, the ingenuity, the ability to think beyond the boundaries of what the Xiphorians expected. The device that had begun as a simple energy source had evolved, and with each iteration, it became something far more potent. It wasn't long before the first human resistance groups, equipped with the newly evolved tech, started to turn the tide of battle. The first major victory was a shock to everyone. A group of human fighters, armed with makeshift weapons, managed to disable a massive Xiphorian battleship, not by overpowering it, but by exploiting its own design flaws. Using the energy device as a tool, they created a pulse strong enough to disrupt the ship's energy systems, shutting down its weapons and rendering it defenseless. It wasn't the most elegant solution, but it was effective. And it sent a powerful message. Humanity was not helpless. They could fight back. The humans quickly realized they could apply this same tactic to other Xiphorian ships, disabling their most formidable assets with a few well-placed shots of their own modified weapons. It wasn't long before the Xiphorians began to take notice of the strange phenomenon unfolding across their conquered territories. Their mighty war machines were failing, their superiority crumbling at the hands of these unremarkable humans. But the real surprise came when humanity began to turn their creativity against the very idea of war. No longer focused solely on direct combat, the humans began to innovate in ways that completely baffled the Xiphorians. They took technology from the Xiphorians and twisted it into new forms, turning their machines of war into everyday tools. The Xiphorians had come to conquer a planet, but humanity had turned their invasion into an opportunity to repurpose the alien technology for peaceful purposes. They harnessed energy in ways that would have been impossible to predict, creating sustainable power sources for their cities. They re-engineered Xiphorian weaponry to build agricultural machines capable of producing food at record rates. It wasn't just about winning the war anymore. It was about showing that human minds could turn even the most destructive of tools into something beautiful, something useful. The Xiphorians, who had prided themselves on their military supremacy, now found themselves facing a foe that refused to fight by any known rules. The humans had shifted the narrative. It was no longer just a battle of technology. It was a battle of wills, of innovation versus rigidity. The Xiphorians had expected humanity to fall in line with their understanding of warfare, but instead, humans had redefined the very nature of battle. They had turned the tables completely. The Xiphorians might have been masters of strength, but humanity had discovered a far more powerful weapon, the ability to adapt faster than any enemy could keep up with. The war was far from over, but the humans now had the upper hand. The Xiphorians, for the first time, found themselves playing catch-up. As the war raged on, the Xiphorians began to understand the magnitude of the mistake they had made. What they thought would be an easy conquest had turned into an ongoing struggle against a species they had severely underestimated. They had come to Earth with advanced technology, overwhelming force, and an unshakable belief in their own superiority. But they hadn't accounted for the one factor that could turn the tide of war: the creativity of the human mind. The more the Xiphorians pressed their advantage, the more the humans adapted, outthinking them at every turn. The early victories by human resistance groups had been thrilling, but they had been small, localized successes. Now, with the continuous stream of new inventions and strategies, the humans began to organize on a much larger scale. Across the world, resistance movements grew in strength and number, each one taking the technology they had re-engineered from the Xiphorians and turning it into new, innovative weapons. They didn't just focus on combat. They focused on survival, on creating ways to strengthen their defenses, to rebuild their cities, to maintain their infrastructure in the face of constant attacks. They repurposed Xiphorian energy sources to power entire cities, creating zones of refuge where humanity could regroup and rebuild. These zones weren't just safe havens, they became hubs of innovation, where people from every walk of life, from scientists to artists, from engineers to farmers, could contribute to the war effort in their own unique ways. As the resistance grew, so did their ability to manipulate the Xiphorian technology. The energy device that had once been a simple tool for harnessing power had evolved into something far more complex. Using the device as a base, humans were able to develop a new kind of weapon, one that could manipulate energy fields to distort the very fabric of reality itself. It was still in its infancy, but early tests showed that it could create temporary pockets of space where time slowed or gravity could be altered. These anomalies created unexpected advantages during battle, allowing resistance groups to neutralize Xiphorian forces with a strategic strike, using the manipulated space to freeze enemies in place or to warp the trajectory of their weapons. It was a mind-bending technology, far beyond what the Xiphorians had anticipated, and it was a testament to humanity's ability to push the boundaries of what was possible. Yet the Xiphorians still believed that brute force would win them the war. They continued to launch large-scale attacks, trying to overwhelm human defenses with sheer numbers. But no matter how many ships they sent, no matter how many cities they destroyed, they couldn't defeat the creative spirit of humanity. Every time they attacked, humanity found new ways to turn the tables. Even in the face of devastating losses, humans adapted. Their resolve grew stronger with each defeat, as if the challenges only fueled their determination. The Xiphorians, for all their might, could not keep up with the pace of human invention. Their own technology, once their greatest strength, was becoming their greatest weakness. The humans weren't just surviving. They were thriving, building better weapons, better strategies, and better systems with each passing day. The more the Xiphorians tried to subjugate them, the more the humans fought back, not with strength alone, but with ingenuity and unrelenting will. It was a battle of endurance, and humanity had learned long ago that they could endure anything. The world was changing, and the Xiphorians had only just begun to realize that the true power of humanity lay not in their numbers or their technology, but in their ability to think, to innovate, and to create. The war was no longer just about survival. It was about proving that even in the face of overwhelming odds, the human spirit would always find a way to rise. The tide of the war had shifted. What began as a hopeless battle for survival had transformed into a contest of willpower and intellect. The Xiphorians, though still an overwhelmingly powerful force, found themselves struggling against an enemy they could not predict or understand. The more they tried to crush humanity's resistance, the more inventive and resilient the humans became. The Xiphorians had underestimated one key aspect of their foe: their ability to innovate under pressure. It was a lesson they had learned too late. The Xiphorian leadership, frustrated by their inability to subdue Earth, began to tighten their grip, focusing on the largest human-held territories and launching full-scale attacks in a desperate attempt to break through. They sent fleets of battle cruisers, warships bristling with weapons, to bombard cities that had become centers of human innovation and resistance. But with each strike, they only fed the human resolve. As the world's major cities burned, underground laboratories and factories worked overtime, pushing the boundaries of technology even further. Humanity's ability to improvise had become legendary. Resistance groups worked in secret, harnessing the distorted energy fields they had learned to manipulate, now producing weapons capable of disrupting entire fleets of Xiphorian warships. With these new inventions, the humans could disable or even control enemy technology. And it wasn't just the military that was making progress. Scientists and engineers began to develop new systems for communication, counteracting the Xiphorian dominance of Earth's networks. In some parts of the world, humanity had managed to create their own interplanetary communication channels, bypassing the Xiphorian control of their satellite systems. This allowed Earth's resistance to coordinate on a scale never before possible, creating a united front against the invaders. Yet it wasn't just technology that turned the tide. It was the humans' relentless spirit. After every defeat, they rebuilt. After every loss, they regrouped and pushed forward with a renewed sense of purpose. The humans fought not just for survival but for their future. They fought for their right to shape their own destiny, a destiny that would not be dictated by alien conquerors. The Xiphorians had failed to understand that humanity was not just fighting for territory or power, but for something far more elusive: freedom. It was a force that could not be quantified, a force that no amount of weaponry or brute strength could ever overcome. As months passed, the resistance began to stage larger, more coordinated attacks. The first major victory came when a human-led fleet, armed with the newly developed energy-disrupting technology, succeeded in crippling the Xiphorian flagship. It was a daring assault, made possible by a strategy the Xiphorians had never considered. The humans, using their knowledge of Xiphorian weaknesses, launched a targeted strike on the enemy's central command ship, disabling its defenses and rendering it defenseless. The impact was immediate and shocking. The flagship's fall sent a ripple through the Xiphorian ranks, a clear signal that the humans were no longer the underdogs. The invaders were no longer in control of the war. The destruction of the flagship sparked an uprising in the Xiphorian-occupied territories. Smaller groups of rebels, once scattered and fearful, found new courage and began to strike back. The Xiphorian hold on Earth began to falter as more and more cities rose up against their oppressors. The invaders had thought they could crush humanity with their superior technology, but they had underestimated the power of a united, determined people. The human mind, driven by necessity and guided by creativity, had transformed the very nature of the conflict. For the first time since the invasion began, there was hope. The Xiphorians, in their arrogance, had failed to see what they were truly up against. Humanity had proven that their greatest weapon wasn't just technology. It was their ability to adapt, to learn, and to keep fighting. The war was far from over, but the momentum had shifted. The Xiphorians were no longer the hunters. They were the hunted. With the Xiphorian flagship destroyed, and the momentum shifting in humanity's favor, the war entered a new phase. The once overwhelming invaders now found themselves fighting on multiple fronts, their forces scattered and stretched thin across the planet. Resistance groups, emboldened by their newfound victories, began to strike with precision and coordination, crippling supply lines and sabotaging Xiphorian bases of operation. For the first time since the invasion, the Xiphorians had lost control of the narrative. Humanity was no longer just surviving. They were pushing forward, reclaiming their planet one battle at a time. The Xiphorian leadership, realizing their situation was becoming increasingly untenable, began to discuss drastic measures. Their once confident veneer began to crack as they saw their empire unraveling. The alien invaders, who had once viewed humanity as a mere nuisance, now considered them a serious threat. Their supreme technology was failing against the human ingenuity, and their forces were being defeated by a species they had believed incapable of any real resistance. Yet the Xiphorians were not ones to retreat easily. Desperate to regain control, they prepared to unleash their most powerful weapon, a doomsday device capable of wiping out entire cities in a single strike. It was the last resort, a weapon of destruction that could turn the tide of the war in an instant, but at a terrible cost. The Xiphorians had always reserved the device for the most extreme situations, believing it would be the final, unstoppable force to break any resistance. They had not used it yet, but now, with their hold on Earth crumbling, the decision was made. As the Xiphorians prepared to launch the doomsday weapon, a secret plan was set into motion by the human resistance. With the battle for Earth nearing its most crucial stage, humanity's most brilliant minds have been working tirelessly on one final innovation, a weapon that could turn the Xiphorians' ultimate weapon against them. Drawing upon everything they had learned from the stolen alien technology, the human scientists created a countermeasure, a device capable of infiltrating and disabling the Xiphorian doomsday weapons core systems. It was an unprecedented gamble, a last-ditch effort that could either save Earth or result in complete annihilation. The plan was simple in concept but risky in execution. A small team of elite resistance operatives would infiltrate a heavily fortified Xiphorian command center, located at the heart of the invaders' remaining stronghold. Their mission was to deploy the countermeasure into the weapons control network, preventing its launch before it could unleash its devastating power. Time was running out, and the human resistance knew this was their one chance to end the war once and for all. The operatives, armed with newly engineered stealth technology and powered by sheer determination, launched their daring mission. They infiltrated the command center under the cover of darkness, moving quickly and quietly through the alien fortress. The Xiphorians, though technologically superior, had underestimated the creativity and resourcefulness of their opponents. The human team, using their intimate knowledge of Xiphorian tech, breached the facility's defenses without triggering an alarm. As they neared the control room, the tension was palpable. Every moment felt like an eternity, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. The weapon was almost ready to fire, its destructive power primed to obliterate humanity's last hope. But the human operatives, driven by the knowledge that the fate of their species rested in their hands, pressed forward. They planted the device that would disrupt the Xiphorian weapons core, just as the countdown began. With seconds to spare, the device activated, sending a pulse through the Xiphorian control systems. The countdown halted. The weapon shut down. The resistance team had succeeded in the impossible. As the news of the failure of the Xiphorian doomsday weapon spread, the morale of the invaders shattered. Humanity's final gambit had worked. The Xiphorians, once confident in their ultimate power, now faced a battlefield where their advantage had all but vanished. The humans had won the final round, and the war was on the cusp of ending in their favor. The Xiphorians had underestimated the human spirit, and now their empire was on the verge of collapse. The Xiphorians' final gambit had failed, and with it, their hope of annihilating humanity. As the word spread across Earth, resistance fighters and civilians alike erupted in celebration, the crushing weight of years of war finally lifting from their shoulders. The loss of their doomsday weapon sent shockwaves through the invading forces, and in their desperation, the Xiphorian leadership realized that they were losing more than just the war. They were losing their grip on the very idea of conquest. The once mighty empire had underestimated the ingenuity and perseverance of a species they thought they could easily subdue. The failure of their ultimate weapon was the breaking point. The Xiphorians, unable to recover from their losses and with their armies in disarray, began to retreat. They tried to regroup, but the human resistance, empowered by their success, launched a final, coordinated offensive. Human forces attacked with overwhelming precision, striking key Xiphorian strongholds and cutting off their retreat routes. The invaders, disoriented and broken, had no choice but to withdraw from Earth altogether, their once imposing war machine now a shattered relic of a failed conquest. As the last Xiphorian ships vanished from Earth's orbit, a profound silence fell over the planet. It was the kind of silence that followed a storm, the calm after years of chaos. Humanity, bruised and battered but alive, had achieved the impossible. They had not only survived the Xiphorian invasion, they had driven them off their world and proven their strength in ways no one could have predicted. But the victory was not without its costs. Cities lay in ruins, and millions of lives had been lost. The scars of the war would remain for generations, but humanity had learned something invaluable during the conflict. They had discovered the true power that lay within their species, their ability to adapt, to innovate, and to fight for their survival against all odds. It was a lesson written in the ashes of the old world, one that would never be forgotten. In the aftermath of the war, leaders from across the globe came together to forge a new world order. The devastation had left much to rebuild, but humanity's newfound unity and strength offered hope for the future. No longer would Earth be vulnerable to outside forces. The technology salvaged from the Xiphorians, once a source of oppression, was now used to rebuild the planet, creating new systems of energy, communication, and transportation that would usher in an era of unprecedented progress. The human race, forever changed by their experience, began to look to the stars. The victory over the Xiphorians had sparked a renewed sense of purpose, a sense that humanity was no longer limited to their home planet. They had proven that they could overcome any obstacle, that they could adapt to any challenge, no matter how insurmountable it seemed. The once distant dream of exploring the galaxy was now within reach. Earth was no longer a fragile, isolated world. Humanity had earned their place among the stars. The Xiphorian invasion was over, but humanity's story was only just beginning. The lessons learned during the war would guide them as they ventured into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them in the vast expanse of space. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Humanity had the strength to shape it, to rise to any challenge, and to use their most overlooked weapon, their boundless creativity, to carve a future of their own making. The dawn of a new era had begun.